knew this would catch on my earring. Hello, and welcome to the First Universalist Unitarian Society of Burlington, Vermont. Unitarian Universalists come from many traditions and spiritual backgrounds, and we welcome all who share our commitment to build a world community based on justice, compassion, respect, and care for our environment, and who are searching for meaning in their lives. Today, let us especially focus on our desire for world community based on international peace, security, and justice, as we celebrate on this date the founding of the United Nations 76 years ago. This happened in 1945, the year of the end of World War II, when many nations lay in ruins after that devastating and protracted world conflict, and the longing for healing, restoration, and the end to war was intense. We here in Burlington especially acknowledge that the property we enjoy and on which our buildings are sited is the unceded territory of the Western Abenaki peoples. It has been their place of meeting and exchange for hundreds of years, and we are the current grateful stewards of this land and property. To learn more about our society and the weekly events and programming for children and adults, please go to our website, uusociety.org. Today we are enjoying another day of October splendor, and we will have an outside coffee hour at 11 a.m. and at the same time an online Zoom coffee hour. Family faith development and activities for everyone will also be held outside at 11 a.m. I am Melinda Lee, a member of our worship associate team, and I am very grateful for all of the others who created or participated in this worship service. Our senior developmental minister, Reverend Patricia Hart, our director of music, James Stewart, our pianist, Sam Whitesell, our directors of lifespan faith development, Erica Reef, and our wizard technical team, Memphis, Everest, Woody Fulton, and James Stewart. I'd also like to acknowledge Mary Williams, our society administrator, who works tirelessly behind the scenes, and there are many others. We are about to begin. Whether you are new today or regulars, you are welcome. Whether you are here in the sanctuary, outside, or worlds away, you are welcome. Come, it is good to worship together. We kindle this chalice flame to remind ourselves of the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment.
Good morning. Wait. This is a treat. There are actually people in the sanctuary, so it's not optional today. You must respond. Good morning. I'm Patricia Hart. I am the lucky person who is the developmental senior minister of this congregation, and it is indeed really good to be here with you this morning. I'm going to do the call to worship in just a second, but I want to acknowledge a couple of things. I want to acknowledge that all these months of not being able to meet together as a whole congregation it was never easy, and I think it's just plain gotten harder as the months have gone by. I am going to name no dates, but I will share with you my hope and confidence that things are moving in a direction that will allow us to gather in greater numbers. And in the meantime, we are doing these little experiments of inviting a few people in the sanctuary. So I'm sure James will show you. You have to wave at the camera so people can see you, board members, and Rowan and Melinda. They're going to figure that out in a second, and you can wave then. Okay, cool. In the meantime, it's still October, as Melinda said, and it's chilly. It's actually supposed to be warmer next week for some reason, and I do hope that if you're local and you can and you want to be here in person, that you will maybe come by later today, and definitely be here next week if you can, because Erica is organizing a fall festival, and there will not only be a service live streamed at 10 o'clock and an outdoor studio where you can watch the live stream, and coffee and activities, but also the very first kind of sort of potlucky thing that we've done in all of these months. So bring a volunteer to make soup or bring chili, and it will be brought outside so that we can all eat together next week. We're trying. We're figuring it out together. The opening words this morning, the call to worship, is a piece written a few years ago by a friend and colleague, Eric Walker Wickstrom. And he called it something that I think is very true. We need one another. We come together this morning because within us there is something that knows we need more than we can find in our aloneness. We know instinctively in the depths of ourselves that we need others for this journey of life, even though we also guard our independence and individuality quite jealously. So let us celebrate all that makes us unique, yet also all that makes us one. And let us dream dreams of all that we can do together. So we are having a story in the service this morning. It is a story that you may well have heard before. I hope, though, that as it is read to you this morning by 4 wonderful people now sitting in the sanctuary, that you will try to be hearing it for the first time.
The Rabbi's Gift. A monastery, once a vibrant place, had fallen on hard times. In the past, its buildings had been filled with monks and activity, but it was all but deserted. People no longer came there to feel nourished by holiness. Only a handful of old monks shuffled through the cloisters, serving God with heavy hearts. The monks, including the abbot, had no idea how to make things better.
On the edge of the monastery woods, a rabbi had a small hut. He would come there from time to fast and pray. Whenever the rabbi was in the hut, the monks somehow sensed his presence. Word would pass from one to the next, the rabbi is in the woods. On those days, the monks would feel sustained by his prayerful presence.
One day, when the rabbi was in his small sanctuary in the woods, the abbot decided to visit him to share his heavy heart. As he approached through the woods, the abbot saw the rabbi standing in the doorway, waiting. The two men greeted one another and embraced. Then they sat and prayed, talking about their griefs and the world.
The rabbi began to weep. Unable to contain himself, the abbot covered his face and began to weep too. The two men sat like lost children, filling the hut with their pain and tears. When, finally, all was quiet, the rabbi said, "You have come to ask me for wisdom. I have no answers, but I will give you a teaching. You can repeat it only once. After that, no one must say it aloud again." The rabbi looked straight at the abbot and said, "The Messiah is among you." For a while, all was silent. Then the rabbi said, "Now you must go." And the abbot left without a word.
The next morning, the abbot called the monks together. He told them he had received a teaching from the rabbi. It would be spoken once and then never spoken aloud again. Then he looked at the group of assembled brothers and said, "The Messiah is among us." The monks were startled. What could it mean, they asked themselves. Is Brother John the Messiah? Or Brother Matthew? Or Brother Thomas? Am I the Messiah? Surely not.
They were all deeply puzzled by the rabbi's teaching. No one talked about it, though they thought of little else. As time went by, a change began to happen. The monks began to treat one another with a new kind of attention, even reverence. A gentle, warm-hearted concern grew among them, which was hard to describe, but easy to notice. They began to live as people who had finally found the meaning they had been looking for.
Visitors had always come to the monastery for one reason or another, but now they found themselves deeply moved by the life of these monks. Word spread. As neighbor talked to neighbor, before long, people were coming from far and wide to experience the reverence and joy they felt there. Soon, young people began asking, once again, to join that community.
The monastery grew and prospered. The abbot had died, and the rabbi no longer walked in the woods. His hut had fallen into ruins. Yet somehow, the monks who had taken his teaching to heart still felt sustained by his wise presence.
As we let this music and song settle into us, let us deepen together into a time of meditation. We will begin by sharing the joys and sorrows of our community, then hold a brief time of silence. Let us hear today these words of joy and sorrow for Sunday, October 24th, 2021. Sorrow. For decades of war, destruction, death, millions of refugees and displaced persons that have happened in the decades since the UN was founded. Joy. For the grand banner made by the fabric artist Claire Graham Smith, which graces our UU sanctuary. Its message of hope, resilience, and community, with its rising green spirals, is an inspiration and a delight. May the joys and sorrows of each of us be the joys and sorrows of all of us, reminding of our common humanity. Amen, and blessed be.
So those of you who are here today can hear me say right at you, as I've been saying to the camera for all of these months, even though we are not meeting in person, and even though we're not passing a collection plate, we are still taking up an offering every week on purpose to remind ourselves, to remember that this congregation exists in the world at all because of the, sometimes people say, irrational generosity of its members and friends. We also do it because it's important to give money away to people, to organizations in the community that are doing the work that is essential, that our values and our principles tell us is essential, and that we frequently, not just sometimes, but frequently don't have the capacity to do as individuals or as an institution. And that's a very good thing. This month, the beneficiary all month has been and still is the Clemens Family Farm in Shelburne. I hope you know, if you don't already, or that you'll do some research perhaps, to find out that the percentage of farmland owned and farmed by black farmers in this country has continued to decline. It is a fraction of what it used to be and a fraction of what it could be if it were easier for black farmers to reclaim some of the land that their families owned ancestrally, or that they would like to be able to farm now. The Clemens family farm in Shelburne is all about black culture, black farmers, the diaspora of black people who have a strong connection to the land. It's a treasured organization in our community, and it's really wonderful that this congregation can support it. So half of today's collection, half of this month's collection will be shared with the Clemens Family Farm, which means that your gifts actually make a difference. They actually get counted. It is very possible to give in lots of different ways, and you'll be able to see more about that on the slide. This morning's offering will be gratefully received. So because you're here, you get to help me do something which I have never liked doing by myself, which is the offertory dedication. We can actually do it together today. Apologies, tech team, for taking things out of order. James says thumbs up. We dedicate these gifts in the service of our mission, to inspire spiritual growth, to care for one another and our community, to seek truth, and to act for justice. Thank you. So one day when I was in second grade, I invited my classmate, Paul, to come to my house after school. I would say I invited my friend, Paul, but that wouldn't be quite accurate. I didn't actually have any friends that year, at least not any that I can even call to mind. I was only in that school. My family only lived in that place for 1 year. My father had the opportunity to be part of a graduate program at MIT for a year, courtesy of his employer. And since my mother had always loved Boston and dreamed of living there, they just packed us all up. All 5 of us kids, untold things, moved from Rochester, New York to Wellesley, Massachusetts. So I had been in that school for a few months, or maybe it was just weeks. I feel like it was still fall. And this kid, Paul, who didn't have any friends either, which is maybe why he picked me, invited himself to my house. Can I come over to your house to play? He asked me more than once, and I said no a few times, and then I said yes. Didn't know what else to say. So, like most of the children in that school, I was one of the walkers. I walked to and from home. And when the school day was over, Paul and I left, and we walked to my house. My mother, on our arrival, was surprised, to say the least. She was not pleased. My mother was pleasant. She always was, but she was not pleased. I was not invited to ride along while Mom drove Paul home, which happened pretty soon after we got there. I could tell that I was in trouble. The showing up with an unscheduled playmate whose last name I didn't even know was not exactly in the rules for good children, a category in which I, pretty much tried to belong. But I was also confused, because being good means being friendly, right? It means being kind and doing things to help other people. Paul was a little strange, but mostly he just seemed lonely. And coming over to my house was something that he clearly really wanted to do. After my mother got back from delivering him to his house, she explained to me how I made a mistake. I didn't argue with her. I also don't remember what she said. I was actually kind of relieved to be saved from this uncomfortable play date, but I didn't fully get it. I didn't get it then, and I think I still don't quite get it now. Being friendly isn't always simple or easy. Our theme this month in worship is cultivating relationship. You know this, perhaps if you remember what we've talked about this month. Weeks ago, I talked about the time I told the story about my kids being in the desert in Mauritania and riding camels and being invited into, I'm not making this up, if you hadn't seen the October 3rd service, you should check it out. I told this story. Hospitality is religious imperative, something that faithful people have to do. And then last week, David Ruffin talked about how essential relationships are because of the ways, among other things, that they teach us about ourselves. And he told a story about how his friends had helped him understand that he was enough at a time in his life when he wasn't sure about that. Cultivating relationships is not just about being nice. It is not just about doing things for other people, like my not quite friend Paul. It strikes me that creating and building on relationships is hard and complicated in part because if it's real, the action is reciprocal. It's happening in at least two directions. When I reach out in friendship, it may well change me if I'm paying attention. It takes some courage to reach out because the gesture might not be welcome or quite appropriate. And it takes some confidence that I actually have something to offer, which I might not be sure of. So it's changing me. And if that gesture, my gesture, is received and accepted, there's probably change happening in the other person as well. And that's just the beginning. That's the hello part, the initial connection. What are we supposed to do next? Last weekend, Peter and I were away. We were at UU Weekend, a gathering that happens every fall at the YMCA Conference Center on Lake George. We were invited by Adam and Rita Bortz, who, among some other members of this congregation, but Adam and Rita especially are devoted to this event. And frankly, I will tell you, they wish a whole bunch more people from Burlington might come next year, and I think Peter and I hope so too. There are sometimes, in past years, there have been 200 or even more Unitarian Universalists from the Albany Church, but also Schenectady and Saratoga Springs and Binghamton and Syracuse and Utica and other congregations, even New York City. I really like this kind of gathering. I like the visible evidence that people are delighted to be together because they know each other. Well, some know each other. And others, like Peter and me this year, have never been there before and didn't know anybody except for Adam and Rita. We don't really know how things work, and everybody else seems to already have figured out the secret handshake, or these days, the elbow bump. So this, an easeful gathering in a lovely place where most people speak the same language, and the beds are comfy enough, and somebody else is doing all the cooking and the cleaning, and all of us are theoretically aligned even in our preferences about religion. Even in such an intentionally easy environment, it can be hard to feel welcome and relaxed. And you can't do it by yourself. Cultivating relationships is hard work, and it's worth it. And another reality we're living with now is that all the pandemic lessons that we've learned about keeping to ourselves, associating only with the people in our bubbles, maintaining distance and being cautious. So one small example, one of the ways that you meet other people at an event like the UU Weekend is you sit at a table in the cafeteria with people that you don't know. But we couldn't do that because, and I get why, because we all took our masks off to eat, and you don't want to do that you get my point. We have learned these lessons well. We know how not to be close to other people, especially ones we don't already know. There in this lovely, lovely place on Lake George, not entirely at ease, I found myself thinking about people who are unhoused right here in Burlington, Vermont, and many other places too, of course, but people right here who don't have any sort of a comfortable place to be, with food and heat and companions. And now, some of them facing eviction from the encampment in Sears Lane, and the people who've been living in motels during these long months of COVID, where will they go? How can we help? Is there any way that I can cultivate a relationship with those people? And then what about the refugees that are coming to Vermont? I hope they're coming to Vermont. If hospitality is a religious imperative, how can we be involved? How can we cultivate relationship with people with whom we don't share a common language or the same religious preferences, almost certainly? It is hard, and it's hard to convince ourselves sometimes that it's worth the effort to believe that we could do much to help other than give money, which matters, which can help other people, but doesn't do much to change us. Which is why all this relationship cultivating is spiritual work. It does change us. It messes with our assumptions about how the world actually is, and why change is hard, and how built-in systems of oppression function, and how it really is possible to forge a connection with somebody even who's very different from you. It's possible to learn from each other. It is possible to strike up some joy in an otherwise scary and dark time. We can't really change anything out there unless we're willing to be changed ourselves. So let me tell you one little story about change as a religious imperative. I think this is about Cleveland and the greater Cleveland area. I served the West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church, a wonderful congregation in Rocky River, Ohio. Rocky River is a very white community, intentionally so. The laws were made to make it be true some decades ago, and it's still true. I looked it up this morning. Rocky River is 97.3% white and middle class. The median household income there is $66,000, or was a couple of years ago. Cleveland, which is very close by, The median household income is $32,000, $32,000. And the population in Cleveland overall is 50% black and about 40% white. So West Shore UU Church in Rocky River is just over 5 miles from a congregation called Denison Avenue United Church of Christ. Denison is a very old church in Cleveland. The building itself is on the National Register of Historic Places. The congregation has changed as the city has changed, and it is now the neighborhood it's in, and has been from the beginning. The neighborhood has changed, and it's now a place of extraordinary poverty and extraordinary diversity. And it's sandwiched between some of the gentrifying neighborhoods on the west side of Cleveland and prosperous smaller cities like Lakewood and Rocky River. Denison UCC is pastored by the Reverend Nozomi Ikuta, who is one of the most remarkable ministers I have ever had the privilege to work with. Nozomi had a connection. Her parents had briefly belonged to West Shore. She was a minister. She was doing good work, and I knew about her, and I hadn't met her. And my friend and colleague, the Reverend Chris Long, who many of you will get to at least hear, if not meet, in a couple of weeks when he's here. Chris was the justice minister at West Shore. He and I worked really closely together, and Chris just kept bringing her up. He kept saying, you know, Nozomi would really love it if you called her. It would be great. You could have a cup of coffee. You could just get to know her. And I had so many things to do, but Chris kept up his gentle pressure, and so I did. I met with Nozomi. And I talked to her about what sort of partnership might be possible between the church that she was serving and West Shore. A busy, essential congregation in a historic church that was pretty much literally falling down, serving a congregation that depends on their church for survival, for food every week, for clothing, for companionship, and a generally prosperous, not very diverse congregation in a not at all falling down building with a big parking lot where urgent problems of housing and food and safety seemed far away. So I asked Nozomi, I said, so what could people at West Shore actually do to be helpful? And she looked at me, she's very funny, and she said, do you have a driver's license? I said, yep. She said, do people in the church have drivers? I said, yeah, a lot of people have driver's licenses. Well, we could probably use your help. If you have a car and a driver's license, there are even more things that you might be able to do to be helpful. And do you have a credit card? I said, yes, I do have a credit card. She said, well, there are some things that it would be really nice to buy. And you could, ask for reimbursement or not. You could also, you and other people could come in and make sandwiches for the drop-in lunch that happens at least one day a week. And then this idea really stuck with me. She said, it might also be useful for somebody to come a couple afternoons a week and let kids in the door when they come for after-school tutoring and basketball. It happens in the lower level in the old gym of the building. And when it's happening, the only staff person in the building is downstairs in the gym with the kids. And the door, of course, is locked in this neighborhood. So somebody just needs to be there to open the door. Could somebody do that? I said, yes, somebody could do that. There are so many stories from the years that I was there and the years since. There is still a kind of a clunky, never quite perfectly shaped, and the pandemic has messed it all up, partnership, but it is nevertheless a partnership between these two very different congregations. Some of the stories that stick out for me that happened while I was there was sitting around the lunch table eating sandwiches, and UU's trying to explain Unitarian Universalism to members of Denison UCC who are pretty doubtful about what they're hearing, doubtful about us, our religion, which doesn't sound very religious, There's one wonderful man. He grew up in Maine, but he's lived in Ohio for over 50 years. His career, he's retired now, but he was a school guidance counselor in suburban schools. And Tom came, the first time that he came to Denison, some cleanup day, he said, "This is 5 miles from my house. How could this be true in the same world in which I live?" When Peter and I were at the UU weekend last week, I led the service on Sunday morning, and I told the story of the rabbi's gift, just like we did today. I really like that story because it is so simple and so profound, and because almost nothing actually happens in it. And everything changes. There is no strategic plan. There is no committee to plan the future. There is even the directive that you must never say these words out loud again, but you must let them settle in and change you and how you interact with each other, you people, one of whom might be the Messiah. Almost nothing. Just one seed of possibility beginning to grow in people's minds and hearts and changing everything. I want to end with just a few words from the remarkable Adrienne Marie Brown, who is a powerful influence for some of us these days in trying to figure out how change can happen. She writes this about love. When we are engaged in acts of love, we humans are at our best and most resilient. The love in romance that makes us want to be better people, the love of children that makes us change our whole lives to meet their needs, the love of family that makes us drop everything to take care of them, the love of community that makes us work tirelessly with broken hearts. Love leads us to observe in a much deeper way than any other emotion. And if love were the central practice of, sorry, my computer died, but it's back. If love were the central practice of a new generation of organizers and spiritual leaders, it would have a massive impact. If the goal was to increase the love rather than winning or dominating a constant opponent, I think we could actually imagine liberation from a constant oppression. We would suddenly be seeing everything we do, everything we meet, not through the tactical eyes of war, but through eyes of love. Cultivating relationship, our religious imperative. So may it be. So may it blessed be. And I think, yes, we are singing. We're about to sing, right, Sam? Okay, so those of you who are here, you might want to get out the teal hymnals. I have kind of sort of promised James that we could sing. Keep your masks on and sing, but that we could sing. And maybe those who are watching can hear us and sing along. Number 1007, There's a River Flowing in My Soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. And it's telling me Who knew singing was so important? Would you have a seat one more minute while we extinguish the chalice, and you can say these words with me too. We extinguish wisdom, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with the world until we are together again. For our benediction today, I want to share some words which apparently were not actually spoken by John Murray, but we quote him as saying this anyway. It's good. Go out into the highways and byways. Give the people something of your new vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover it, let it shine, use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach the kindness and everlasting love of God. Go in peace.